Flyzik. Good afternoon and welcome to the show. I'm Jim Flyzik. During today's show, we will discuss progress being made in secure cloud computing in the federal government. With me today on the show are Lieutenant Colonel Paul Stanton, Army Cyber Command, U.S. Army; Dawn Leaf, the Deputy CIO at the Department of Labor; Shishu Gupta, the Deputy CIO at NGA; David Blankenhorn, the Chief Cloud Technologist, DLT Solutions; Damian Whitham, the Senior Director, Cloud Solutions, General Dynamics Information Technology; and Stacy Cleveland, the Director, Global Practices, U.S. Public Sector at HP Enterprise Services. We're talking secure cloud. It's certainly a hot topic these days. Cloud is being discussed just about everywhere we go. Let's start with Dawn Leaf over at Department of Labor. Dawn, give us a little bit about some of the progress you're being made with cloud computing at the Department of Labor.
So this has been a big year for DOL in terms of moving to cloud. We migrated from 9 separate legacy email and infrastructure systems to a commercial federal community cloud email system, and that's been very successful. We've moved our legacy acquisition management system to a commercially hosted cloud-based acquisition management system. We've started piloting a customer relationship management package on the Salesforce platform as a service offering. So we've been making a lot of progress this year.
Yeah, that sounds great, man. That's terrific. I know as we've been doing these shows over the years that we first cloud was just an idea, and then everyone was trying to figure out what are we going to do. And now we're actually hearing about a lot of progress being made. That's exciting. Lieutenant Colonel Stanton, first of all, thank you for your service, sir. Appreciate what you're doing for our country. How about cloud computing over at the U.S. Army? Give us some ideas about progress being made there.
Yes, sir. Appreciate the opportunity. From an Army cyber perspective, we're leveraging cloud technologies to support network operations and cyber defense. Specifically leveraging some of the principles associated with cloud computing, ubiquitous access and elastic scalability. And so we're leveraging cloud technologies to provide operational insights to a much broader population of Army personnel. Sure. Traditionally, only network operators that worked out of an operations center had insight into what was happening on the actual network. Right. But now, using ubiquitous access and web interfaces, we're leveraging the ability for a much broader population of mission owners to have access to the information associated with what's happening on the network. Additionally, using the concept of elastic scalability, we're able to allocate our limited resources according to the mission requirements. So instead of static allocations that had been the way of the past, we're now able to leverage the right computing resources according to the dynamic environment in the cyberspace domain.
Yeah, terrific. It sounds getting the right information, right applications to the right people at the right time. Cloud offers an awful lot of opportunity there. Stacy Cleveland over HP. How's HP positioning to support this move to cloud? What are some of the progress you're making in supporting your various customers?
Thanks, Jim. We've been working hard as our clients have moved from really starting to look at infrastructure and platform and software as a service to really begin working with them as they wrestle with the hybrid cloud challenge. The reality is they have a significant investment in their in-place infrastructure. A migration to cloud will be a journey, and wrestling with that legacy environment as they go, and being able to still have an end-to-end visibility of the enterprise are key problems that we're helping them work with. The Helium Cloud solutions, we believe, are going to offer that great umbrella and still offer the same sort of flexibility to meet the different demands across the public sector enterprise.
Yeah, terrific. Great. Well, we'll drill down on some of those thoughts as we work through the show here today. Shishu Gupta over at NGA. When I think of NGA, I think of lots of data and a lot of collection of data. So I imagine you have some interesting cloud programs over there. Can you give us some ideas, some progress you're making at NGA with cloud?
Yeah, thanks, Jim, for having us on. It's a great program. Sure. It's a pleasure to talk to you and your listeners. NGA is part of the intelligence community that works on imagery analysis and collection and mapping predominantly. We've been doing a lot of work with the intelligence community to create the IC, the Intelligence Community's Information Technology Enterprise, ISITE, as it's called. within the iSight realm, there's a number of service providers that are being created, 8 of them, and NGA is a service provider for the common desktop for the entire community. Don talked about creating common enterprise email. We're doing the same sort of thing, but even going further and creating collaboration services in the entire desktop workspace environment for the community. NGA and the Defense Intelligence Agency are teamed up to do that work. We've already deployed desktops to over 5,000 users, and so we're well on our way. We're using phase 1 as a pilot for NGA and DIA, and then we're about to release an RFP in a couple of weeks for the broader deployment to the rest of the community, so that'll be done commercially. Today we're doing it inside NGA and DIA with our personnel, but in the future we're going to contract that out for the broader community. So a lot of work going on to create common desktop services, and enterprise management services will follow that. And then we're doing a lot of work just in getting us ready to really move into the cloud environment. The big paradigm shift there is about integration of data and applications,
Right.
And that means we have to do a lot of work to refactor and to rewrite some of the data and the applications that we have so that they can work in this shared environment. We're doing a lot of work there.
Yeah, I can understand that. And maybe later on we talk about some challenges. We can talk about some of the things that have to be done to sort of like reset governance and change some business processes as we move to the world of cloud. Damian Whitman over at Whitham at GDIT. Can you talk a little bit about what GDIT is doing to support this movement to cloud and supporting your customers in that movement?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Jim.
Sure.
So what we're doing at GDIT is, in addition to our community cloud that's going through the FedRAMP process as we speak, we're also looking at, we're recognizing that not all clouds are appropriate for, there are different applications that go with different clouds. So what we're looking at is we're looking at providing a variety of different clouds to our government customers to serve them, because we recognize that, the best fit may not be just a managed cloud like we offer. It may be something else that somebody else offers. So we're putting together some kind of a brokerage relationship to allow our government customers to leverage that. And, the goal is to give the government customer the right cloud environment at the right cost price, at the right price point. So that's kind of where we're going with our cloud strategy.
Sounds like a good strategy to me, like find the optimal solution for the agency at the right price point. David Blankenhorn, how about over DLT? How do you guys support customer, and what are you doing in cloud? Talk about a little bit of progress you're making over there.
Great, thanks, Jim. In the 3 years I've been at DLT, when I came on early, it was interesting watching the public sector adopting cloud technologies and how they were going about doing it. Being exclusively focused on public sector, we were noticing that from a private cloud perspective, it was still very much emerging. There were a couple of agencies that were kind of ahead of the pack, like NASA.
Right.
And then there were others that were dabbling in the public cloud space. It was mostly dev tests, maybe a couple of public websites. Now, fast forward to today, it's interesting looking at the workloads being leveraged. If I look at across our customer base, very few of them are actually using it for public websites, public cloud that is. Most of them are actually using it for real production workloads. I see a lot of GIS applications, lots of research and analytics.
Sure.
I'm seeing lots of collaboration sorts of applications, and even some really interesting ones like databases that manage grant management and funding sorts of things. So it's really seeing a diverse collection of real use cases and real workloads being deployed into public clouds in a safe and secure manner.
Yeah, and I think, there's no doubt about it. Cloud is here to stay. I mean, when we go back a few years, people are saying, is it just the next, the next phase, and people are going to talk cloud, this, that, and the other thing. But clearly what we're seeing with the progress and the stories we're hearing, this isn't a useful fad. I think it's here. Absolutely. Let's talk about some specific programs. What we like to do is we hear in general about progress being made, but we'd like to hear about like a specific program maybe you can cite that where you really think you're making some progress, something that we can highlight as sort of a best practice. Let's start with Shishu Gupta, this time over NGA. Can you give us an example of maybe of a specific program that you think is benefiting NGA today because of the move to the cloud?
Yeah, I mentioned that common desktop. So the first one that we've created is a virtualized environment where everything is thin client. So all of the data resides back in the servers behind our firewalls. We push data to desktops that sit computers that sit on the desktop that really don't contain any of the information per se. That's the best way to protect the information.
Yeah, great security.
So it's a great way to protect the data. It's also a great way to allow us to scale rapidly to other other users if we want to deploy quickly and at lower cost. So we're driving down the price points of the cost per user at the desktop, and we're having better control of the data behind the firewall as we do that. We're also doing a lot of work in the areas that David mentioned about publishing and posting information to public, in the sense that, for shared use within the intelligence community and for our customers, to post products and to allow broader access to information. That's a big part of our strategy to free the data that we have. We have a lot of information that's been hard to get at. You had to know who at NGA to contact. Now, by service enabling that data, as we call it, you can make that data more easily accessible to enterprise search tools that are available through the cloud. So you come into one search portal and you can get access to any of the information you want.
I love that. Free the data out there to everyone. Lieutenant Colonel Stanton, how about the specific program over Army that you think is really making a difference today by moving to cloud?
Yes, sir, absolutely. So again, from an Army cyber perspective, we're focused on operations and mission impact. We're very closely partnered with DISA in pursuing cloud technologies for defense enterprise email. So to take, for instance, an individual trouble ticket. In the past, that would result in immediate remediation of whatever that problem was. But now my ability to aggregate data from across the enterprise and analyze the data from across the enterprise, I start to see trends.
Right.
And so now perhaps an individual ticket is related to tickets that I see otherwise in other locations that tells me something more operationally relevant is happening. And so it's not just a remediation process, but rather I get to see the big picture. And so we're leveraging the same technologies as we move towards the joint regional security stacks and the sensor data that we're going to pull off of the network. I need to be able to aggregate, correlate, analyze the data from across all of these different sensors to find the proverbial unknown unknowns. So now that I have the capabilities to store and virtually represent this vast amount of data as one data store, it gives me the ability then to make correlations I had never been able to make in the past, and truly start to do the trending and analysis that allows us to become predictive in nature with what we do operationally. So it's not just immediate reactions, but rather let's analyze the trends because I have the ability to collect the data and analyze the data to start being proactive in terms of what we do to support mission impact.
Yeah, terrific. So you're working horizontally across all the various programs, whereas before they were all separately managed, and now you've got the ability to collect it all, analyze it all, and make a lot more decisions based on that.
That's absolutely the case. And it's truly revolutionizing the way that we perform both network operations and cyber defense.
Wow, terrific. That's interesting. Hopefully I'll talk a little bit more about that too as we go on. Dawn Leaf, how about labor? What are a specific program that you think is making a difference because of cloud computing?
So I'd like to approach that really on two levels.
Okay.
We look at something as basic as email, and it doesn't sound like a big deal. But
it's a bigger deal. Having been there and done that, I don't think people realize, just to consolidate email is a complex process to begin with. But
I'm more focusing on mission impact.
Okay.
So in 2011, DOL did a listening tour with its 17,000 staff that are located throughout all 50 states in the U.S.
Okay.
And the top number one IT improvement they wanted was bigger mailboxes. So by moving to cloud, we went from 200 megabytes to 50 gigabytes. So they have 400 times as much storage. Plus they have collaboration abilities, plus they have unlimited access to archives. So the way that translates into mission, our former Deputy Secretary at Labor, he estimated that maybe our people were spending 2 hours a month doing nothing but managing their mailboxes. Wow. So they get that 2 hours back, 2 hours times 17,000 employees, and they're better able to support the mission. So that's just one general improvement that touches every single agency that we have, whether it's mine safety, occupational safety, pension benefit guarantee. The other piece, though, that's more specific in answer to your question would be the customer relationship management pilot, because the idea behind that is a one-stop shop where anybody who is coming to labor who wants to know about his or her specific benefit can access the information from all the agencies in one place. So those are the two really specific mission improvements.
Yeah, cool. I mean, you put it in cloud, it's available to everyone, right? A big difference than the way we did things in the past. David Blankenhorn over at DLT, is there a specific program that you could cite that you're working with a customer on that you would hold up as an example of something that's making a difference?
So there's some work we're doing in the research communities,
Okay.
specifically around healthcare. And what we're seeing is fundamentally what could be a major change in the way we actually do healthcare-related research within the U.S. Traditionally in the past, it required vast amounts of compute resources and storage, frankly, to actually do these sorts of analytics and research. And what we're seeing with cloud is, rather than having tens of millions of dollars worth of high-performance computing environments that need to be there and running 24/7 and supported and all the costs associated with that, these researchers literally can do their research for thousands of dollars, get in, get out, and oh, by the way, it's not a wait in line.
Right.
It's a run them in parallel,
Right.
just because of the sheer scale of the cloud platforms that are out there. So I think this can really potentially revolutionize the way we're doing research, not only in healthcare, but in other areas as well, and really accelerate some of the effort that these researchers are doing in terms of finding new medications, better understanding the biology of humans, and really kind of allowing this research to happen faster and more efficiently and less expensive.
Yeah.
So that's a really exciting couple of projects I'm working on right now.
Sure, it is exciting. I mean, we're talking quality of life, helping, individuals and so forth. That's exciting stuff.
The upside is that it allows a lot of money that was being spent on infrastructure can now actually be spent on actual research. So we're taking.
Yeah, good point. Very good
So
point.
I think that there's about 30 to 40% of grant monies that are being used for research are going towards IT infrastructure, and if we can reduce that to 10 or 15%, then there's a lot more money.
More money for research.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Makes sense. Stacy Cleveland, how about HP? Can you cite a program that you think is one that you'd point out saying it's really making a difference by cloud computing?
Absolutely. We're partnered with Secure Key Technologies and the U.S. Postal Service to support the Federal Cross-Credentialing Exchange Program.
That's a neat program.
It is a great program, really providing a mechanism in the cloud to store those credentials for citizens so that they can securely access citizen services like access to health benefits, student loan information, their retirement benefits, without the need to use a different password and credential at every time, making their access to those services much, much better. The service and its pilot capabilities are hosted on our FedRAMP authorized managed cloud, and we're in the process of about ready to launch that pilot.
Wow, I am excited about that one. I've been saying, this is our 105th show. I think on almost every show, we do a show on identity management. But I hold the opinion, if we can nail that identity management issue and really be able to get credentialing, and so we have confidence in who we're working with, the user, who the users are, devices and so forth. There are so many applications ready to roll out. So that's a great program. Damian, Whitham, how about over GDIT? Well, could you cite a specific program maybe that you think is making a difference?
Sure. A good example is we had one customer we've taken from a legacy physical environment and installed them on our cloud. And the key thing is that they have an enrollment period where 2.5 million users have to be able to enroll. And so we've been able to spin up an environment for them, create VMs, dynamically add capacity for storage, processing, et cetera. And then we're able to have this in place for about 3 months, dial it down. So what the true savings here is that the government's not paying for these assets for all this time. They're only using it for the period that they have to, and then they're able to put it into a dormant state until they need to redo it in the coming year.
Cool, very nice. This is we are talking secure cloud here, so I'm going to shift gears and talk a little bit about security in the cloud environment. But before we do that, we need to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Lieutenant Colonel Paul Stanton from the U.S. Army, Don Leaf from Labor, Shishu Gupta from NGA, David Blankenhorn from DLT Solutions, Damian Whitham from General Dynamics Information Technology, and Stacy Cleveland from HP Enterprise Services. We're talking secure cloud. We've talked a little bit about the benefits and specific programs. Now let's talk about that security issue. I think there was a lot of conversation when we were talking about going to the cloud, a lot of issues around, well, what about security? What will this mean? Is this going to change security posture? So let's talk about how we're addressing security cloud concerns in the cloud. Let's start with Lieutenant Colonel Stanton. How are you viewing that security issue as you move your these applications to the cloud?
Yes, sir. It's a huge concern for us. As we move towards a goal of creating a virtually consolidated data store, we have to consider the threat environment and the fact that we face a very sophisticated and evolving threat on a daily basis. Sure. So first and foremost, we have to control access on. So we've had very tight access controls for who can gain access into the cloud environment. But of equal, if not more importance, is we're securing at the data layer.
Okay.
We're providing metadata tags all the way down to the data layer that allow us to very fine-grained control over who can access individual elements of the data. And again, this is truly revolutionary in terms of the way that we're controlling that access, such that you have to have the appropriate credentials to execute a query, to try to combine data sets at the actual data layer. And then finally, we're implementing data provenance. So I'm tracking what's happening with the data. I create metadata tags that show me who has actually accessed the data and any modifications that have been made to it, such that I can detect any potentially malicious or inadvertent even modifications to the data. So we're really zeroing in on the data tier itself.
Right. Excellent. Yep. Don Leaf, how about at Labor? How are you approaching that security issue as you move to cloud?
So I think I'd like to add a slightly different perspective.
Okay.
So the security requirements for IT systems and services are the same, whether they're insourced, outsourced, whether it's a cloud delivery model or not. So what we just heard about was the methodology associated with the cloud delivery. Right. But what we've found to be the most challenging piece is actually something that was first identified in the NIST Cloud Computing Roadmap, and I was part of that when I worked there, which is that it's the roles and responsibilities. Because you now have a service provider, plus you have a broker, a third-party integrator, plus you have the organization. And we've found that having a real specifically laid out chart of who's going to do what if and when you have a security event, who is going to do what if that does in fact turn into a breach, what are the timelines, who has what responsibility to make sure that we can still satisfy our responsibilities for FISMA compliance, because you can delegate your services. You can delegate authority, which you do when you move it to a provider, but you can't abdicate your responsibility. Right. So that has been the real challenge for us.
Yeah, I think if there is a breach or something happens, the department's not going to be able to say, well, it was somebody else. I mean, you're probably going to be the one that has to testify as to what went wrong. So I understand that changes the model quite a bit. Shishu Gupta, how about NGA? What are some of the security approaches you're taking as you move to cloud?
Well, I think what Don said was absolutely right, that it's about roles and responsibilities as well. And it is, as General Clapper says, it's about tag the data, tag the people to give you the security. But the other part of it that we don't talk about very much is just the sheer scope of the risk in terms of the people and the number of entry points into the networks. And so one of the big advantages of cloud is that by centralizing more of that, we can reduce by maybe a factor of 10 our entry points into the network, the interfaces that we have from our secure environment to the more open environments. In addition to that, we've already reduced by a factor of 5 our number of data transfer officers, and we're reducing our number of system administrators as well. And we intend to continue to go down probably by another factor of 10 in both of those areas, so that we can dramatically reduce the risks at the of incompatibilities or inconsistencies in the way that individual people implement security controls that we've designated across the agency and across the network. And as we go into a multi-agency environment, it becomes even more important that we follow more standardized procedures and have more accountability and auditability of the people and the data as it's moving through the network.
Yeah, terrific. You know, I ran an innovation workshop last week, had about 20 government CIOs there, and we talked about in those very same terms. A lot of times they're looking at efficiencies by being able to have less, by the fact that you've got everything in the cloud contained, you can get rid of a lot of the old Band-Aid approaches we've been putting in over the last 20 years. You know, every time something breaks, you come up with a solution, this, that, and the other thing. And you could go with solutions that, like Lieutenant Colonel Stanton talked about, that now can manage across a diverse set of technologies. So you're actually able to reduce the number of tools and get better security. Follow up on that?
In fact, there's the other part of that is just patch management. So we have so many different software baselines that are out there, and they're changing all the time at an asynchronous rate. And so we have to constantly be monitoring upgrades and patches, security patches that the vendors put out. So having fewer of those and having fewer places where we have to impose those patches also tightens up security.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dawn?
So if I could interject, what we found is that moving to the cloud model, even again for something as simple as integrating the infrastructure to get to email, sort of leveraged and forced us to standardize. Because the analogy we use inside is if you have a house or a boat, there are certain things you can live with. But when you go to sell it, and you inspect it, you find there are things you have to correct. And we found that we really needed to standardize our infrastructure even down to the desktop level. So I can't emphasize the importance of that enough.
Yeah, terrific. Great stuff. So it's sort of like side benefits here that are just evolving as we move to the cloud. Damian, Whitham at General Dynamics, how do you guys approach that security question?
Okay, so first of all, I couldn't agree more with what Dawn has said. The interesting thing is that if you look at what FedRAMP represents, it's kind of like a baseline. And we're handling healthcare information. We're PII. We're also handling some DoD type of information. As a result, not all customers are the same in their orientation, and so they all pose a different set of challenges to us. So the interesting thing is that we have to be able to be flexible to know that most of the customers, or some customers, are starting to poke at security requirements that go beyond where FedRAMP is today. So that's going to pose some challenges because they're not all going to be in sync. And then the other thing is that there are even some of those customers are going to want some advanced capabilities. And the good thing is since we've had such experience with running secure operations centers and advanced cybersecurity capabilities, we can bring those to bear to meet some of those other requirements depending upon what our customers are going to ultimately need. But we're starting to see they're pushing beyond the boundaries of FedRAMP today.
Yeah, I think so too. I think FedRAMP's great for sort of like a standard to work towards, but I think you're right. Some of your customers are going to have diverse requirements. Some are going to have requirements quite different for especially in security. Stacy, Cleveland at HP, how about how you guys addressing that security in the cloud question?
So, thanks, Jim. I agree with everyone. It has been a big challenge, and I will just dwell for a moment on FedRAMP. I think the evolution and standing FedRAMP up has really boosted the ability to actually embrace cloud. It's given that known standard, and frankly, it's made it much easier for companies like ours to actually get into the cloud because it provides that baseline set of standards. You don't get the sort of scale and cost payback without a tremendous amount of critical mass. And if you design for lots and lots of standards, it becomes difficult to get there. On the other hand, there are going to be environments that have greater needs, as we see that with the rollout of DISA's ECSB. I think the fact that we start to see some coalescence around those standards is going to greatly enable it. And those are the places that we begin. And then we look at other platforms like our private cloud solutions as really places where we can offer clients the sort of flexibility that individual agencies might need that wasn't envisioned in some of the other places.
Right, excellent. Terrific. David, Blankenhorn over DLT, how are you addressing that security question with your customers?
Sure. So first I want to really reemphasize a point that Dawn made about you can basically delegate some responsibilities, but you cannot abdicate. I just want to really reinforce that. And this is where the whole shared responsibility security model comes in, is at the end of the day, it's very much like a government-owned, contractor-operated, contractor-owned, government-operated, GoGo, Coco, whatever. But yet basically, it's those sorts of models. And you can apply a lot of your learnings there to cloud providers. So there's a lot of similarities, a lot of synergies there, so it's not a net new thing. The key point, though, is that with public cloud providers like an Amazon Web Services, we deal with them a lot, is that you need to understand which of those control objectives are going to be their responsibility and which ones remain your own. And for an infrastructure as a service platform, you got to understand everything about that hypervisor is still your responsibility. So we spend a lot of time really working with customers explaining everything about that hypervisor, that operating system and the patches and the applications and the data. That still falls under the responsibility of the customer. And a lot of people think, I'm just moving to the cloud and the cloud's going to take care of it. The reality is that ain't so. Right. And there's still a lot of things that need to be done, and a lot of prior art, prior learning will still apply. So don't throw out your best practices because it's cloud, but you do need to evolve some of your best practices and some of your methods to take advantage of cloud.
Right. Right. Very good. Dawn Leaf at Labor, what are some of the benefits you think you're going to see by this movement to cloud? Obviously, we're doing it because we expect benefits. I would assume we're expecting cost savings, but are there some other things that you would cite as benefits you expect to accrue?
Well, obviously, yes. Looking just briefly at cost, it's not just a reduction, it's definitely that avoidance in terms of what it would have cost labor, for example, to expand our storage 400 times for each individual. But when you get past that, and past the economies of scale, there is that inherent flexibility. If you look at what the basic premise for cloud is, the elasticity, and it's been mentioned in some of the other applications, the ability to be able to respond quickly. But I guess over and above all that, I would argue that cloud or any outsourced service, whether it's federal shared service, really forces you, again, to evaluate your overall strategic direction and where you're going with IT, and to think about it, and I think you mentioned it earlier, not in a reactive just response or whack-a-mole fashion, but actually to really think strategically about where you're going with it.
Yeah, I love that. I think that did it. You're right, too. I think when you have something like cloud, it forces you to think strategically and to really relook at everything you're doing and where you're going. Very good points. Lieutenant Stanton, what do you think? Some of the benefits you see coming out of this effort?
Absolutely. So it goes well beyond cost savings from an Army cyber perspective. It's all about our ability to see the operational domain. This ability to aggregate data from across the enterprise is absolutely critical. And what it does is it allows us to empower the workforce. We're able to automate the mundane such that the workforce then is able to focus in on where the operational and mission priorities are. And so we're leveraging the data aggregation component, leveraging the ability to elastically scale our compute resources to focus them on automating these traditional workforce requirements that then absolutely repurposes the workforce to go to the next level. And that's fundamentally why we're arguing that it's truly transformational in the way we're doing NetOps and cyber defense.
Right. So your customers can focus on the mission and not worry about that infrastructure because it's there.
Absolutely.
Shishu Gupta over at the NGA, what are some of the benefits you're seeing, expect to see coming out of this?
So there's four really that I want to focus
Okay.
on. The first one is from a mission standpoint, it's about sharing information, doing joint production, and doing new types of analysis. We talked about big data analytics as an example of that. From a cost standpoint, we do expect to achieve 25% cost savings over our 2010 baseline by the time we finish our cloud migration. So there is a cost imperative associated with that. Cloud also, because of the fact that so much of the services are common, gives us more agility, so we're going to actually be able to do things faster and create new capabilities faster in the cloud. And then the last one is NGA is unique in the intelligence community in that we actually are deployed all the way from the open internet to the secure, unclassified, secret, and top secret domains.
Right.
So we actually, by deploying at the lowest level possible, we actually have the ability to potentially bring in a whole new vendor base that we've never really accessed before, and that gives us a much broader acquisition base to choose from, and that'll help us with our agility and our innovation.
Terrific. Great points there. Stacy, Cleveland, what do you think? What are some of the benefits you think we're going to see coming out of cloud?
I think we've named many of them. I think the
That's always a problem with this question. It's sort of like ditto, But
Absolutely. I think the key is, as we've talked about, it is really an enabler of transformation. It really provides that mechanism to see whether it's in savings or in time, an opportunity to really focus on the mission outcome that'll be realized as a result of the cloud implementation. I think the key is really taking the opportunity to step back and take that strategic view.
Right.
We've seen clients who become disappointed, frankly, with their experience in the cloud because they didn't do that, because they thought it was really kind of going to be a panacea.
Right.
And at the end of the day, without really a clear focus on what that outcome was that they hoped to achieve, as well as how it fit into their overall transformation journey, they came away disappointed. So we try to work with our clients to help them see that overall transformation journey and move in more of a strategic direction.
Terrific. Well said. David Blankenhorn, what do you see as on the questionnaire of benefits that you expect to accrue coming out of these efforts?
So I really see cloud as being actually an enabler for innovation. And the reason I say this is, as an IT architect, when we design things, we have to go in and look at your peak workload over a 3-year or 5-year period. And we design things that way. And if you listen to Gartner, 80+% of resources sit idle. Why is that? Because we designed it based on your peak load over 3 years. Right. The cool thing about cloud is that you have the ability to make your server platforms change shape and size and overall capacity. So I don't have to be right the first time. I can get it right eventually. So I can actually fail fast, fail cheap, and then iterate and get it right. And this is what I think is really powerful about cloud is I can get that thing out there and get it right in a faster time to market than I can by buying a server, getting the wrong size. I can't go back to the vendor and say, hey, take this back and give me a smaller one and give me my money back for the difference. You can do that with cloud. Right. And so I think innovation is really one of the major drivers.
I like that, innovation. I think you're right, too. You're onto something. Damian Whitham over at General Dynamics, anything you can add to that and some benefits that we missed?
The only thing I would say is that I agree with most everything that's been said. What it's really doing is it's allowing agencies to go from a program management O&M type of strategy to a portfolio management and giving much better span of control. And so that's what I envision agencies will really benefit from is you get a more top level approach to how you handle your infrastructure.
Terrific. Well said. Now that we've talked about the benefits, let's talk a little bit about the hard thing, some of the challenges that are still out there. But before we do that, we need to take a short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. To the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Flyzik here with Lieutenant Colonel Paul Stanton from the Army, Don Leaf from the Department of Labor, Shishu Gupta from NGA, David Blankenhorn from DLT Solutions, Damian Whitham from General Dynamics IT, and Stacy Cleveland from HP Enterprise Services. We're talking secure cloud. We were talking about benefits when we went to break. Now let's talk about the hard stuff, the challenges the things that you still need to get done in order to get where you want to go. What are some of the challenges you're facing? Let's start with Shishu Gupta over at NGA, what are some of the tough things that you still have to get done to get to where you want to be with this?
Thanks, Jim. So the first one is that there's a proliferation of cloud. Given that cloud is so new, everybody wants to have one, and we're on multiple domains. And they're all configured differently, so some of those interfaces are different. That means for us, we might have to manage different software variants, and we're looking a lot to these kind of middleware layers to help us manage those, to act as brokers across different cloud platforms. So that's an important one that's going to be difficult. The second one is really the cultural issue about changing business practices and learning how to think differently about cloud. Everything you hear and read about cloud computing is that if you really want to harness the power of cloud, it's about thinking differently about your problem, new workflows and new processes and new business processes on the back end. Those are going to be difficult.
You just made my day, because this is the 105th show, and it's the 105th time somebody on Challenges says culture, not IT necessarily. So it's just amazing. That issue comes up every time we talk challenges on any subject. Lieutenant Stanton, what are some of the tough things that you got to do? Some of the things you still have to, the hurdles you got to get over in order to get where you want to go?
Sure. People are the centerpiece to Army cyberspace operations. We have to recruit, train, and retain an elite force, the right folks. We're doing a great job of bringing the right people in and keeping the right people. But to the point other panelists have made, cloud provides this degree of agility. How do we develop our training mechanisms to make sure that we keep our workforce up to date with a constantly evolving IT infrastructure? And not only do they have to understand the infrastructure, but we're also asking our workforce to be able to develop the next algorithm, to be able to discern the next unknown, and that requires deep knowledge and training. And it's constantly in flux. And so our traditional methods of schoolhouse teaching aren't necessarily going to get us to where we need to be. We have to rethink the way that we're maintaining the level of efficiency and effectiveness of our people.
Yeah, excellent. Well said. It's funny. Before we began recording, I was talking with someone, and I made the point that I'm glad that I made it to the management ranks before some of the kids that are coming up actually got into the workforce, because their expectations and their knowledge of technology is clearly going to far exceed some of the things that have gone on in the past. So you're right. You got to stay on top of that technology curve right through as you move to these new technologies. Dawn Leaf, how about labor? What are some of the challenges, the sort of the tough things yet that you're trying to work through to get where you want to go?
So I guess I would make just 3 points to add to what's been said.
Okay.
One thing is buying IT services, again, whether it's going to federal shared services, commercial cloud providers, it's not like buying a chair. There's a lot you have to do to your infrastructure and within your organization to even get there. You have to have the bandwidth. For us alone, since we're all over the U.S., that was 530 circuits that had to be upgraded in between 6 and 9 months. So that piece, that prep, and understanding that it's not just an acquisition program plan, but an actual program management plan that you need for your communications, if you have bargaining unit represented employees, how you're going to do the cost model, that piece you really do have to manage. So the second point I would make is that, with all due respect to my colleagues from industry, there is a natural tendency in the business models to sort of optimize from the vendor or the supplier's perspective. And it gets back to that broker service provider mix. And for example, what we found in our provider, since they had federal community cloud clients, is if there was a telecommunications problem, the assumption was that it was on a problem with the agency or the telecom provider. Well, in truth, that was not the case. So we spent about 30 days trying to resolve that, and we worked with our vendor, to their credit, to change that model so that you don't have to sequentially prove that it's not their issue, so that everybody starts working it at the same time. That's not new, but it's exacerbated in cloud because of the broker role. And then the last thing I would say, again, with both federal shared services and commercial cloud services, is that old concept of an independent verification verification and validation function. Somebody who can technically assess
Right.
what's going on is very, very important because you're not as close to it.
Right.
This concept of people not wanting to give up their servers because they're server huggers, there may be truth to that, but there is also that delegation, again, of authority that you are responsible for and having a technical mechanism to assess it, not just the acquisition piece.
Yeah, excellent points there, and I can relate to, and again, all due respect to the vendor community, you want the optimal solution for labor, not the optimal solution for the vendor to provide to labor. Interesting issues there, and it requires, as you say, some IV&V and some due diligence to make sure things stay the way they are. We've got about 11 minutes to go in the show, and we always like to end by looking out to the future, where this is all going. So I'm going to ask each panelist to give me sort of to look in the crystal ball and say, where is this all going down the long run? Share a vision for the future. What improvements will we see in the government, let's say, next 5 years or so, that can be attributed to these cloud strategies? Let's start with David Blankenhorn at DLT Solutions. David, what's it look like down the road? Where's this all going?
So I think first and foremost, I think in the industry, titles like mine, Chief Cloud Technologist, are going to go away. All right. So I'm hoping by 5 years from now, there won't be Chief Cloud Technologist because it'll be actually within the DNA of our IT infrastructure, and it's just another way of doing IT. Okay. So it's not kind of some special different thing. It's actually baked in. I think in 5 years, we're going to see a much more ubiquitous use of cloud computing, both private and public, across the public sector. I think we're going to see a maturation in the security posture, and the threat dynamics are going to change, get better, I think.
Okay.
We're going to see better compliance capabilities with the cloud providers, both public and private. We're going to see a lot more innovation. I think we're going to see a lot more mission success in terms of getting things to market, getting new services iterated more rapidly, evolving more rapidly, and I think we're going to see more innovation. So overall, I think those are kind of the high levels. Right now, most of the stuff being used is either going to be SaaS, software as a service, or infrastructure as a service. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to see a greater adoption of platform as a service over the next 3 to 5 years.
I do too.
Because I think that's the least understood right now within the market as a whole, not just public sector. But I think platform as a service is going to be a major thrust moving forward when people realize they can actually do these custom applications in a much more flexible, much more standardized method to really get these services out there. And that's actually an area that DLT is focusing on is the platform as a service space.
Excellent. Damian, Whitham at GDIT, what do you see down the road? Where's this all taking us?
Okay, so there's two things along the same lines of what David's saying. I think that you're going to see that a lot more of the programs will be written for the cloud as opposed to the way things are going today. So you're going to see a lot more of things that are natively designed. Because I think one of the things that people have been experiencing is performance drops off when you go from a legacy physical environment to a virtual environment because the expectation's there, but the reality is not. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is I think cloud computing is going to give a tremendous boost to mobility, and then mobility is going to give a tremendous boost back to cloud. So it's going to be this cycle. It's going to keep feeding itself. And the reason I say that is if you look at just the statistic I read the other day, more than half of the computers that are being sold today are laptops. And if you think of handheld devices, you think of tablets and smartphones, you're going to see things like VDI applications and things along those lines are just going to take off. So it's going to be very interesting. And actually, if you think about it, that the mission of the government might be better served if they're out with the people as opposed to being at their desks.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Back to my point too about when the kids enter the workforce, they live in the mobile world.
They're digital natives.
Right.
People like you and me, we're digital fugitives.
I like that. Shishu, Gupta, what do you think? Where's this all going? What's the future look like for you?
Well, we've talked a lot about security, and that if we can master that identity and access management component of that, I think it is key to us doing coalition operations in the future. We work with lots of partners, whether they're civil partners inside the U.S. for disaster relief or non-traditional international partners that when we go to war or have some sort of conflict. So that's a big part that I think is coming, and cloud computing will really enable that through more secure data and transfer of information. But the other thing that NGA is really more interested in is this immersive experience. Think of it as, I like to think of the Iron Man story where Robert Downey Jr. is reaching into the data, he scans that
Yeah.
board of the World's Fair,
Right.
and he reaches in and he throws off all of these objects, the trees and the buildings and the road networks and the signs, and up comes this new element that he comes in, he sort of reaches in and blows it up. That three-dimensional immersive experience where analysts can move around in the data more interactively without a mouse is really where we think we can go in cloud computing, because of the scalability and the ability to bring lots of compute power to data is really the future, and that's where we want to see it go.
That sounds like exciting stuff there. Stacy, Cleveland, where's this all going? What's the future look like to you with the cloud initiatives?
I think cloud is really going to also empower our program and business owners to be able to really, if you will, acquire their technology in much the same way that we acquire things like travel services or other consumer kinds of goods through broker-type services. If you envision kind of the kayak example where you're able to really lay out what your parameters are for, in this case, what your parameters for your application would be, identifying what your security parameters are, what kind of data requirements that you have, and really being able to choose among your alternatives for the right platforms, the right services, the right price point that you're willing to achieve, and be able to move much more seamlessly into that kind of a technology experience. And as long as our acquisition policies keep up with us, I don't think we'll be held back.
It's a good one. We didn't hit that too much in the challenges, but acquisition policies are going to be challenges right along the way. Lieutenant Colonel Stanton, where's this all going? What's the future? What's your crystal ball look like down the road?
So building on the concept of sharing with coalition partners, I think the cloud supports sharing fundamentally. And I think that we're going to be able to increase the ability to bring data together from across organizations and fundamentally remove the threat's ability to hide in the noise. Building also on the point of allowing the analysts to be more interactive with the data. Again, that's going to help reduce the threat's ability to move unencumbered and hidden across the data sources. And I think that there's some challenges associated with that in terms of standardization at the data layer. Mm-hmm. But the mission relevance and the mission impact are going to compel us to reach those standards such that we are able to share data seamlessly across our organizations.
Yeah, so that transparency issue opens up and creates opportunities for better insight into situational awareness and what's actually going on across the enterprise as opposed to individual initiatives. Dawn Leaf, what's it look like to you down the road? Where's this all going? What will these cloud initiatives do for the future of government?
So to echo some of the themes that have been raised, certainly mobile computing and a real practical example, having our investigators in the field be able to use capture images, video, audio to associate those with an OSHA investigation case or mine safety investigation case, to be able to share that in the digital courtroom, to be able to leverage data analytics. We have a pilot program actually with DoD on vets data going on at DOL, but those are all pilots. So to really expand that to the point where federal employees have the same tools to support their jobs that we all do personally to conduct our daily business, that's really where I see that going.
Wow. Terrific, excellent, well put. That's some great content there, guys. Appreciate that immensely. Let me try to do a little bit of recapping here. It's always a challenge for me, but some of the things we heard. When we talked about progress, I heard about a lot of consolidation going on. I heard about a 9-to-1 ratio in terms of being able to get things down and consolidate. We talked in progress about ubiquitous access and the idea that in the hybrid world, it's going to open up opportunities for a lot more people to access data. We talked about specific programs. I like that concept, free the data. I thought that was an excellent point. And of course, we have a lot of specifics around email consolidation and the idea that you were able to increase the amount of storage just by going to cloud. Everybody has additional capability. On the security front, We talked about access. I like to focus on the data. I think it was Lieutenant Colonel Stanton, you said you focus on protecting the data as the primary piece on that. But we also talked about different priorities with SLAs now and how you're going to have different ways of working with your providers, as well as, though, the opportunity to standardize. If you can standardize, it's going to simplify in a lot of the approaches to security because you'll have better control, and all those Band-Aids we've been putting on over all those years can go away. When we talk benefits, of course, cost comes right to the top of mind. We would, I think there's an expectation that there will be cost reductions, but I also heard things about better sharing of information. We talked about getting information faster, bringing in new technologies, new vendors can enter the equation and work. And I like the concept, I think it was David mentioned, innovation enabler. By having the cloud there, you open up a whole new world of opportunity to be creative and innovative. When we talk challenges, we talked about the fact that things are proliferating and things are moving fast. So, as you look at what you're doing, you're going to have to, work on that because there's a lot of different configurations out there. It's just not, coming up with a strategy of how to deal with all those configurations. And the culture issue. We're talking about doing things different. And anytime you talk about doing something different, human nature is it's a culture challenge. People have a natural tendency to fear change from time to time. We heard about people skills. It's going to be extremely important to have skilled resources and stay in front of that learning curve to keep the skills in place. And finally, we talked about the future. And I think what I heard is cloud's just going to become a standard operating procedure. We're just going to think of everything as we building it in the cloud. It's just going to become the standard way of operating. It's going to enable mobility, and mobility in turn will continue to push for more cloud. Gives us more transparency and allows agencies to focus on mission as opposed to having to focus on how the technology will work. So a lot of great content there. Thank you. And I'd like to turn and first thank all of our panelists for taking time from your busy schedules to be here with us. Thank the sponsors, without which we don't have a show. Thanks to the great people here at Federal News Radio. And most importantly, thanks to the listening audience out there that tune into the show. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM.